puzzlers. This is Ronnie Waldman once again with another puzzle corner. And if you agree that variety is the spice of life, I think you'll find this one very spicy. Norman has certainly mixed things for me this time, but don't let that put you off looking for my deliberate mistake, which is likely to happen any time from now on, so watch out. We're starting at Southampton, just as one of the two largest liners in the world is preparing to pull away for another trip across the Atlantic. Can you say which of those two great ships this is? You ought to be able to tell by the number of funnels. It's the Queen Mary, of course, one of Great Britain's greatest prides. Her sister ship, the Queen Elizabeth, has only 2 funnels. But what funnels? Which is the older of these 2 luxury liners? Can you remember that? Of course, the Mary is. She's just 4 years older than the Lizzie. But which is the longer of the 2 ships? Well, although she has 1 funnel less, the Queen Elizabeth is 12 or 13 feet longer than the Queen Mary. Now, how long would you estimate her to be in feet? How many feet long is the Queen Elizabeth? You could put 15 cricket pitches end to end inside her and still have room to move. Or, if it's of any help to you, she's just about as long as Waterloo Bridge. She's 1,031 feet long, over 343 yards, or nearly 1/5 of a mile. Now here goes the Queen Mary being fussed over and pushed around by those tiny little tugs. They seem to be able to move her easily enough, but what is the Queen Mary's gross tonnage? Do you know? It's 81,237 tons. If she hit you when she was traveling at full speed, she'd make a nasty dent. Talking about full speed, she did her fastest ever crossing at an average speed of nearly 32 knots. Can you remember how long she took to come from the Ambrose Light to Bishop Rock on that record crossing? How many days and hours did it take her? The answer's 3 days, 20 hours, and 42 minutes. Christopher Columbus took considerably longer than that, of course. Perhaps he shouldn't have bothered. And with this bird's eye view of Southampton docks, with the Queen Elizabeth still lying alongside, we come to another bird's eye view. What are we looking at now? Perhaps it might help if I tell you that that's the River Thames on the right, and that this building is near 2 very famous bridges. And this is how it looks from London Bridge. It is, of course, the Tower of London. Now, what about this? Another bird's eye view, and a very familiar one to the people who use it. It might almost be the maze at Hampton Court, but it isn't. It's a good deal larger than that. I expect that sound clue told you it was an aerial view of London Airport. Well, now for something much more peaceful, although in a way perhaps equally well known. It was in this churchyard that a famous poet wrote one of his best-known works. It's in Buckinghamshire, and in an adjoining field you'll see in a moment a monument erected to the memory of the poet. Where is this, puzzlers? And who was the poet? Here's just a line from the famous poem. The paths of glory lead but to the grave. Gray's Elegy, of course, written in this churchyard at Stoke Poges. Before we have a closer look at the monument, what was Gray's Christian name? It was Thomas, and as this tablet records, he lies unnoticed in this churchyard where he wrote his greatest work. Here's the resting place of another great poet, John Bunyan. What was his most famous work, and where was he when he wrote it? John Bunyan was the author of Pilgrim's Progress, and he wrote it when he was in prison at Bedford, where his statue now stands. What was the pilgrim's name? Here he is, dressed in armor, doing a St. George and Dragon act with someone called Apollyon. The pilgrim's name was Christian. And the old man who put him on the right road, what was he called? His name was Evangelist. Bedford, by the way, is the county town of Bedfordshire. But what's the county town of Buckinghamshire? Here it is. The county town of Buckinghamshire is not Buckingham, it's Aylesbury. And I don't suppose I need ask you what Aylesbury is famous for, need I? Just in case anybody didn't know the answer, here it is. Aylesbury ducks, of course. By the way, what's a duck's husband called? Doesn't matter if they're Aylesbury or wild ducks, it's just the same. The duck's husband is a drake. male goose, what's he called? He's called a gander, of course. What's the plural of young geese? The answer to that one is goslings. Male and female swans, what do they call them? Mrs. Swan is a pen and Mr. Swan is a cob. Now I know why Norman has a habit of sticking his neck out. A number of swans together is the same as a number of cows or deer. It's a herd of swans. But what's the name for a number of geese? If they're on the ground or on water, they're called a gaggle of geese, but in flight they're called a skein, spelled S-K-E-I-N. Now here's an unusual one. There's a special word for large numbers of ducks when they're gathered together in companies. I wonder if you've ever heard it. It isn't used much these days, but when it is used, the word is battling or battleline. Now for a group of how many questions. First of all, how many horses were drawing this coach and how many grey toppers were there aboard? Here it comes again. It's a 4 in hand, meaning 4 horses. But how many grey toppers? The answer's 5. How many did you get? Now from grey toppers to telegraph wires. How many are there up there? No need to get your glasses out, Auntie. Count the porcelain insulators. I'll settle for them. The answer's 56. I think this is some kind of water pump, but it doesn't really matter what it is. I only want to know how many veins there are on that thing up there. V-A-N-E-S, I mean. How many? Would it surprise you to know that there are only 18? Well, there you are. Count them if you don't believe me. Here we have a most unusual inn sign. Don't ask me the name of the inn. Couldn't have been opening time, otherwise Norman would have gone inside to find out. How many little pigs were there up on the top there, puzzlers? Well, there's the answer for you. 3 little pigs and a mummy pig. This sign's not so uncommon, so I've 2 questions for you to answer. 1, how many black and white squares? 2, what's the name of the pub? Well, there are 64 black and white squares. The name of the pub is the Checkers. They open at 10 a.m., and I don't mind if I do. Many inn signs can be traced back to ancient heraldry. The Checkers is one of them. And so is the mitre. But what is a mitre, do you know? It can be some kind of a joint in carpentry, but in this case it has an ecclesiastical meaning. A mitre, as represented here, is a bishop's cap. Now here's another well-known name for a local hostelry, the Crown and Sceptre. How would you describe a sceptre? As you can see from this hanging sign, it's some kind of a staff. It is in fact a staff symbolizing royal authority or royal personage. And lastly, cross keys are the emblem of a patron saint. Which saint? They're the emblem of St. Peter. And now sit back and hold tight, because here comes Old Blood and Thunder. Now, what is the title of this blood-curdling epic?
You see, marking your street, my beautiful cherry works to perfection. The genius who devised this little thought that he would be the first to test its efficiency. Oh, yes, I polished him up, Mark, just as I polished you up.
You may or may not have seen this yourself, but you must have heard your aunts and uncles talking about this wicked old rascal and the things he got up to.
And so, Mark, you thought your sweetheart Joanna would love your gold and your pearls, eh? Didn't dream that I should love them more.
The original title of this melodrama was The String of Pearls, but you'll know it as Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street.
Pound 100, 100,000, until I said to myself, I will possess 100,000 pounds.
Remember the woman next door to Sweeney who kept the off-ration pie shop? What was her name?
And so my wealth will grow and grow.
Her name was Mrs. Lovett. What happened to her in the end, you know? Well, she had a few words with old Todd, so he polished her off by pushing her into one of her own ovens. Nice type, Sweeney.
Gold. Gold, you luring demon of mankind. There is no woman half so fair, no serpent so insidious as you. You are my idol. My God.
And what happened to Sweeney Todd himself?
But gold... Cashew.
It seems that the sailor chap with the golden pearls managed to escape. Then he came back and pushed Sweeney into his own chair and down his own trap door. And anybody who was left lived happily ever after.
A long procession of them. Ghosts, specters, spirits, all crying out, murderer, murderer.
You nasty old man. And now from dirty dogs to the four-legged kind. I expect you all know that when you look through a camera, the picture is upside down, like this. Norman found this very awkward at a recent dog show. He said that if it had been a baby show, it would have been all right, but he had trouble in recognizing the various breeds of dogs when they were the wrong way up. What do you think about that? Do you think that you could recognize a dog when it looks as if it's standing on its head and walking backwards into the bargain? For instance, what do you think this one is? Putting him the right way up proves that he's a Welsh Corgi. And now have a go at this one. Might help if you tried standing upside down yourself. Ladies first. Unmistakable anyway up. A bulldog, of course. And now here's the next one. It is a dog, I assure you of that, but what sort? When he's nicely brushed out, he's a real old English sheepdog. Last one coming up and coming upside down. What is it, puzzlers? Yes, a bull terrier. Not so very difficult after all, was it? And now from a dog's life to a housewife's life. You try saying that quickly on a Saturday night. Well, this is an observation test, puzzlers. Watch this scene very carefully. Now, first of all, was the clock an electric clock? Secondly, was there a kettle on the gas stove in the corner behind Wifey? And thirdly, what did she do with the shopping list she was making out? Well, here come the answers. The clock has a pendulum and a hole where the winding key goes, so it is not electric. There's not even a gas stove in the corner, never mind the kettle. And lastly, here's the shopping list just where she left it, on the table. Well, she should be back any minute now, and I'll bet 20 to 1 she's forgotten something. Any takers? Here she comes, bless her little cotton socks. Yes, we know, you left it on the table. Well, now let's see what else you've forgotten. Eggs, soup, sugar, salad cream, coffee, peas, tea. Come on. Biscuits, jam, margarine. She's forgotten 3 items, puzzlers. What are they? She's forgotten the butter, the bacon, and the cheese. And now for one of those something in common questions. Here are 4 totally different objects, all of which have something in common. You have to see if you can spot that something. A coin, a newspaper, a tombstone, and a season ticket. And the one thing they have in common is they all have dates on them. Now try another 4 and see if you can discover what they have in common. A piano, a car, a briefcase, and a typewriter. And the answer to this one is, of course, that they all have keys. Now for a quickie, and only 3 of these have something in common. A clockwork train, a hank of wool, a traveling clock, and Norman's Aunt Agatha. Which is the odd one out? Well, they all want winding up, except Aunt Agatha. And that brings us to our musical quiz, introduced and played by Ian Stewart.
Thank you, Ronnie. And hello, puzzlers. Now, the 4 tunes I've got lined up for you this time have something to do with the forces. I don't think you'll have much difficulty in finding the titles. Anyhow, we'll soon know because here's the first one. No trouble at all, was it? The Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. Now, here's tune number 2. Yes, The Changing of the Guard. But do you know who wrote it? It was written and composed by Flotsam and Jetsam. Now, stand by for tune number 3. The answer is, there's something about a soldier. But who made this so popular? The one and only Cicely Courtledge. And lastly, not much doubt about that one, was there? But what did the king's horses do? They marched up the street, and then they marched down again. Well, that's the lot for now, so until the next time, goodbye.
And as Ian Stewart just said, that's the lot, except, of course, for the answer to my deliberate mistake. I wonder how many of you spotted it. I made it quite early in the film, when you were looking at the bird's eye view of Southampton docks. I said the Queen Elizabeth was still lying alongside. Well, you really should have got that one, because I'd already pointed out that the Elizabeth has only 2 funnels. This was the Mary again. Uh-oh, he's at it again. Look, Ma, no arms. Well, puzzlers, I'll be back very soon with another boatload of questions and answers, and, of course, another deliberate mistake. So this is Ronnie Waldman saying thanks for the use of the hall, and goodbye now.